and welcome back to Mariana Math Books. My name is Mariana and today I am here with my ANCIENTSATHON 2023 wrap-up. First, if you don't know, ANCIENTSATHON is a reading event created by Jennifer Brooks and at Jennifer Brooks and Tori at Stronger Words. She changed her name channel and I can never remember, but something like that. I will the name in the screen. And then in the second year, David Wiley joined in as a host, and now all three are hosts, and they are all excellent. Good strong words. And anyway, all excellent channels. Check it out. The point of ANCIENTSATHON is to read books and works from before 1700. They usually have 3 prompts, 1 fiction prompt, 1 poetry prompt, and 1 non-fiction prompt, and everything has to be written pre-1700. So I usually, never mind, no, it's not fiction, it's a play. The first prompt is a play. So usually I don't do the play prompt because I am not a fan of reading plays. And so I switched it for fiction, and for that one I started, and I did warn you in the TBR that I wasn't going to finish. I started Don Quixote. Don Quixote is a satire about chivalric culture. The main character is Don Quixote, who is, firstly, I didn't know that his name was not Don Quixote, but that's the name he gives himself as a knight. That's his knight name. And he is obsessed with chivalric culture. He's obsessed with chivalric literature. He's obsessed with books about knights and stories about knights, and so he has read so many books about knights that he believes himself to be a knight. He's a bit delusional, let's say, and he is now living in his head in the world of the stories of his books. And so he decides that he's going to be a knight, and he's going to go on the road to be a knight, like the knights in his stories, because he's convinced that he's a knight. And in the journey, he stumbles upon all kinds of adventures. The most famous one that I was so excited to finally read, because I know it so much, because it's such a famous scene, and you know, you can't be from Spain or Mexico or probably anywhere in Latin America without knowing the windmill scene from Don Quixote. And it is a scene where Don Quixote sees some windmills and he believes they are giants, and so he goes and attacks them, and it's very funny. What surprised me about this book, and maybe it shouldn't have, but it did, is that Don Quixote actually keeps hurting a lot of innocent people. I thought that Don Quixote was just this silly character who did silly things and it was just funny, but I assumed that because he's such a bad knight, because he's not a knight, that he wouldn't hurt anyone because everything would go wrong. Like he would fail at everything and that would be hilarious and he wouldn't hurt anyone. But no, he actually, like, in his delusions, he hurts really violently people thinking that they are bad guys when they're not. And I was very surprised by that. And then I realized the criticism element of the social critique element of the satire. And I remembered the chapter about knights from Powers and Thrones by Dan Jones, which I was also reading at the same time for Historiathon. And in the end of that chapter, it talks about sort of the silliness, and silliness is too light a word, like the ridiculousness of chivalric culture that remains to this day, and like the chivalric orders that are still held in the UK but also in the US, and people are still being made knights and the ridiculousness of it all. And obviously in that book you read about the reality of chivalry culture, because I always love this idealized romanticized version, but obviously that was not the reality in history. And the moment that like everything clicked for me was a time where Don Quixote is hurting people related to the church. So his squire, who is not really a squire, he tells Don Quixote, we're going to be in trouble for hurting a man of the church. And Don Quixote tells him, I have never read about a knight getting in trouble in any of the books that I have read, no matter how many murders he commits. And when I read that quote, everything clicked, and I thought, wow, this is so genius. And now it's making me want to go back and finish the book. I will finish it. But I told you guys in the TBR that I wasn't going to finish it, at least not soon. So that is Don Quixote, which was written in the 1600s and by Miguel de Cervantes. So that is Don Quixote. Poem number 2 was poetry, and I won't spend a ton of time speaking about this because I just finished filming like a half-hour Gosh Fest rambly video about the poem that I read, which is the poem of the Cid, or the Mio Cid. And I absolutely love this. 5 stars, all-time favorite, will reread, will be my favorite, will be part of my favorites of the year at the end of the year. I would die for a really fancy special edition. Anyway, so this so I won't go into detail because you will get a long video where I go in detail about this. This is epic poetry, Spanish epic poetry written in the 1200s that concerns the deeds and the life of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, who is known as the Cid, who was a Spanish knight of the time. The Cid died in 1099, and this is from around 1200s, and it's an epic poem in 3 acts, 3 parts. The first part is about the exile, or it begins with the exile of the Cid from the kingdom of Castile, and then the second part is about more family and political focused, and it's about the wedding of the daughters of the Cid and like all of the political and scheming and stuff surrounding the wedding. And then part 3 is about the Cid avenging his daughters because the husbands turn out to be assholes. So the third act is like the rescue and then the trial of the husbands, and then like, you know, trial, courtroom drama, dueling, top tier tea, popcorn content. 5 stars. At the time of the Cid, Spain had been conquered by the Moors. I need to read more about how the Moors ended up in Spain. There were Spanish kingdoms and Moorish kingdoms, and so the Cid is from the Spanish kingdoms and he fights against the Moors, who are the bad guys, you know, in the time period and in the poem. And so it's basically the Cid versus the Moors in the part where it's about battle and stuff. But then, as I said, it's a ton of family drama and just soap opera excellence. So that was the poetry that I read, and again it's from 1200s. And then the non-fiction that I read is actually because of the poem of the Cid, because I was actually combining editions, but in this other edition of the poem of the Cid, I actually read all of like the introductions and stuff, and here it talks about a non-fiction piece of work, a non-fiction piece, a biography of sorts, a very short biography of the Cid that was written at the time period, and it is called Historia Roderici. Historia Roderici, I don't remember when it was written, but I will put it on the screen, and it was originally written in Latin, Historia Roderici, which is like the history of Rodrigo, who is the Cid. And so because I was reading the poem and I was obsessed with the Cid, because also I have to give a shout out to The Lions of Al-Rassan, because this is a book that I will probably mention in some form or other in all my videos this year. The Lions of Al-Rassan, one of his characters, one of the main characters, Rodrigo, is this Rodrigo, is the same Rodrigo. And so I was just obsessed with the Cid, Rodrigo, etc. And so I wanted to read this nonfiction because it would fulfill the nonfiction prompt for ANCIENTSATHON, which I originally wasn't planning on doing. I was only going to read the Mio Cid, and then Don Quixote was an addition with some friends from Discord. Anyway, Historia Roderici begins with all of his genealogy, like his family tree. His father, his grandfather, his blah 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 blah. You know, in a very Tolkien way. I love reading works from this time period because you can see very clearly the inspiration for, you know, Tolkien and these types of works. So in the same way that Tolkien gives you paragraphs of this was the son of this, and then he had this son, and then this son had this son, and then this son had this son, and then this, or the Bible too, you know, to mention another kind of known book, in that same fashion. That's the first part of the Historia Roderici. This person has this son, and then this son has this son, and then this son has this son, and then this son has this son, and then finally Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. Obviously, it's not focused on his family life because that's historical, and why would a piece of history mention a woman? God forbid, and especially at that time. So his wife is just mentioned in passing as like, oh, he married this person with no importance. And but his daughters are again mentioned in name. The whole thing with his daughters and the weddings and everything here is, you know, fiction, drama for the poem. But in the Historia Roderici, you focus on the exiles. He was exiled several times throughout his life. You focus on the battles he fought. You focus on the territories he conquered, the kings, the Moorish kings he defeated, and the conquering of Valencia, which was a Moorish kingdom, and afterwards the Cid conquered it, and that's actually where he ended up living all his life and dying, in Valencia. You focus on that. Obviously, it's not like a narrative nonfiction in the way that you have nowadays, the biographies and such, but it's nonetheless entertaining because of the way that it's written. It's written in a very funny, I mean, for me it's funny way, where there is clearly a lot of, how do you say, a lot of commentary written by the author and a lot of assumptions, you know, because Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar is a hero, and so obviously there is nothing written ill about him. There is just one part where he is like okay, I admit in this part Rodrigo was kind of an asshole. I mean, he doesn't say it like that, but basically. But there's just one paragraph where he says it like very reluctantly, like, yeah, not even I can defend his actions in this battle. He did treat people pretty poorly afterwards. But everything else is pretty much he's a hero, he's a hero, he's a hero. And so he adds a lot of embellishments. That's the word I was looking for. A lot of embellishments and a lot of adjectives. If Rodrigo went to battle, it will say he bravely and gallantly fought in battle. That type of thing. And then also it adds a lot of assumptions like and then Rodrigo received a letter, and as soon as he opened the letter he gasped, and all of his men gasped, and that type of thing where you're like, I mean, probably that happened, but like we all know for a fact that everyone gasped. And then you have the full transcription of all the letters that were exchanged in the battlefields, you know. This person sent this letter and here's the whole letter. So it has those kinds of idiosyncrasies that make it very fun to read. It's super short, like it's like a 45-minute read. Unfortunately, it was available in Kindle Unlimited because I couldn't even find it in Project Gutenberg. And yes. So that was my reading for ANCIENTSATHON 2023. I think this is the most fun I've had. I have participated every year since it started. The first year I read the Saga of the Volsungs, and then the second year I read Beowulf. And while I enjoyed both, I think this year I was really into it, into everything I was reading, obsessed with everything I was reading. Loving everything I was reading, and so it was a very fun experience. So thank you to Tori and Jennifer and David for hosting this readathon. I hope we'll see each other next year because I do have fun with this readathon. And yeah, that would be it. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't miss my super long gush fest about the poem of the Cid. It is coming because I have already filmed it. And that would be it. I will see you soonish in another bookish video. And in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.